Thank you all so much for being here. I'm so excited to get started with the Action Network. My name is Megan. I am the Director of Strategy for Student Voice, which basically just means that I oversee all of our programs and our resources and our current national tour. So I'm really, really excited to be with all of you now. A little bit about me. I grew up in Connecticut and then went to high school in South Carolina and am now a junior at Barnard College in New York City, and I study education and sociology. I've been part of Student Voice for the past 3 years, and I'm so excited to see so many new faces here. And I'm really excited that you all wanted to be here. And so a little bit about the Action Network. We decided to start this program because we wanted to make sure everybody had access to the resources that we had access to. The past year, we've been on a national tour of schools, which is the second national tour we've done. And between the two tours, we have been able to meet a lot of really amazing students. Many of you who are here tonight, we've met before, which is awesome. And through those experiences, we've been able to hear some good stories and really see how students are able to make their schools and communities better, and wanted to use this program as a way to share some of those strategies and some of those skills with more people that we're not able to meet with in person necessarily. So we're really excited about this. We'll talk through more of the logistics later, but wanted to really have this call to make sure that everyone understands Student Voice both as an organization and as a movement and as a concept, and then just give you guys the opportunity to just ask me some questions about anything. So I am going to share my screen and go through a little presentation about Student Voice as a concept, Student Voice as a movement, Student Voice as an organization. And then at the end, there'll definitely be time for you guys to ask any questions you may have, and I'm happy to stick around to chat about Student Voice or anything else. So I don't, okay, that should be it. Can you see my screen? Yeah, amazing, awesome. So give it 1 second. Okay, so yeah, so here's our presentation. So here's what we're going to go through. We're going to start out by talking about the belief of Student Voice, a little bit more about the kind of the underlying concepts of the Student Voice movement, some of the guiding principles that we have as an organization, and then talk a little bit more at the end just about the logistics of the program, and then have some time for a Q&A. So at Student Voice, we believe that students should have a say in their own education. Education has a lot of different stakeholders, and those stakeholders, people who are in business, people in the legislature, educators, community members, and students all play a role in bringing this idea to fruition through sharing power in education reform. We know that students are the biggest stakeholder in education and in schools, yet are seldom given any opportunity to shape the institutions that they exist in. I always say this when we're on tour stops and we're talking to students, but we as students spend 35, 40 hours a week in the classroom, which is just as much as someone working a full-time 9-to-5 job spends at school, yet we really never have the opportunity to have a seat at the table and give feedback about what works about our education, what doesn't work, even though we spend so much of our time there. So our underlying belief at Student Voice is that students should be able to shape the education infrastructure that they learn in and exist in. So, in short, Student Voice refers to the values, opinions, beliefs, perspectives, and backgrounds of students in school, leading instructional approaches and techniques that are rigorous and relevant to student passions and ambitions. So to make that less complicated, we think of student voice as a concept as being like lowercase s, lowercase v. So that student voice just as a concept is our values, opinions, beliefs, and perspectives as students. We believe that all students should have the opportunity to contribute to decision-making processes relevant to their lives and their futures, and that in order to combat systemic inequity and systemic inequality, young people must have a more powerful voice in the education system. I always think that it's really absolutely crazy how young people are often kind of given a hard time for not participating in the political process and not being engaged citizens, but our schools don't prepare us to do that. So it's like people expect us to go from, being quiet and not having a voice and not having an opinion about what happens in our schools to all of a sudden then being these activated citizens who go out and vote all the time. If you don't have a voice in your school, how can you be expected to have a voice in your society and in your community afterward? So what we try to do at Student Voice is empower young people to have that say in their school, and we believe that that will help students become lifelong, engaged, activated citizens in their communities. So this is us as an organization. So Student Voice Organization, which we refer to as capital S, capital V, was founded in 2012 with the hashtag StuVoice. Students were on Twitter back when people our age used Twitter much more than we do now, that they were seeing that there were these really, really great conversations happening among educators and administrators, teachers, principals, all of these adults in the education space who were having this dialogue online about how schools can be better. And the fact that that existed was great, but students felt that they should be included in those conversations. And sometimes they were, and sometimes they weren't. But when they weren't, they started having their own conversations, and they're using the hashtag StuVoice to talk about their experiences in schools, and basically realized that regardless of where they were from and what their backgrounds were, where they went to school, the type of school they went to, despite all of that being different, they had the same shared experience that they saw the problems that existed in their schools, had ideas on how to make them better, but no one would listen to them because they were quote unquote kids. So they started this by students, for students organization to amplify the voices of young people and create resources for young people to make their school a better place. So we as an organization, we see ourselves as working as a connector and a facilitator of local and state organization. We want to support the people who are doing the work on the ground, whether that's through supporting organizations or supporting young people who are doing work in their communities, or both. And then we also lead our own programs, just like this one. So long story short, our mission is to empower students to take action on issues that impact their education. And so guiding our mission is the Student Bill of Rights. So a little background on the Student Bill of Rights, but there are 9 rights in the Student Bill of Rights, and these were come up with by students across the country during the organization's 2015 and 2016 national tour of schools. So the organization went around the country to over 20 different states and 50 different schools, and had roundtable conversations with students about what their schools were like, what the school climate was like, did they feel that their education was an equitable education? And through those takeaways and through students voting, they came up with this Student Bill of Rights. And so for the folks on the phone, I'll read out that there are 9 rights. So there are 9 rights to an equitable education that we believe are access and affordability, that all students should have the right to an affordable and equitable education. All students should have the right to civic participation, the ability to engage with their community and expect their schools to treat them with the rights of citizens, regardless of their age. The third right is to influence decisions. All students have the right to shape decisions and institutions that will affect their future. Basically, believing that students deserve a seat at the table in decisions that are going to impact them. The fourth right is deeper learning, that we believe that all students should have the right to an education tailored to their individual needs and that prepares them for life beyond high school. The next right is diversity and inclusion. we believe that all students should have the right to learn in an environment that doesn't discriminate against them and reflects the variety of backgrounds in the student body. The sixth right is due process. All students have the right to understand existing rules in their school and the opportunity to address unfair treatment. Then we believe that students should have the right to free expression. Students have the right to express themselves within an education context. The second and last right is modern technology, that all students should have the right to access modern technology to use for their education. And the ninth right is positive school climate, that all students should have the right to feel mentally, physically, and emotionally safe in school. So these are the 9 rights that we believe are most important to ensuring an equitable education, and that every student across the United States, regardless of where they live, where they come from, what kind of school they attend, regardless of their race or ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and ability, all students should have the right to these 9 rights in order to have an equitable education. So guided by the Student Bill of Rights, we operate 6 programs. So this is the Action Network that you are all a part of. Our second program is called Youth United for Action, which I encourage all of you to join after this call ends. But Youth United for Action is a Facebook group for youth activists around the world. It is a group where youth activists come together and build a community to support one another. We share opportunities like fellowships, scholarships, job opportunities, other opportunities within other youth-led organizations, as well as have discussions, ask questions, share successes, share failures, and just build and connect the broader youth activist community. We run 2 different types of fellowships. So the first is the Journalism Fellowship. This is a school year-long program where we have 18 student journalists from across the country who learn about different types of journalism. So print media, photography, podcasting, op-ed writing, everything in between. And their work gets published in our blog and our website and a magazine that we do each year called Schooled. The other fellowship is the Ambassador Fellowship. So I know we have some of the ambassadors on this call, which is super exciting. But the Ambassadors program takes 15 students from across the country during each school year, and they have bi-weekly calls where they receive professional development, and then they also receive funding and support to do a passion project in their community. The next program is our Chapters program, which is a program in which you can start a student voice chapter in your school. And we will support you in starting that chapter, as well as provide you with resources about action planning and changing policies in your school. We like to think of this as what if student government had agency and the ability to impact policy. So we have a team member on our team who oversees this program and supports students as they work to change policy in their school. And then the last thing we have is a national tour that we're currently on that's going to wrap up in the next couple of months. But we have been traveling across the country. We've been to over 60 different schools throughout 2019 across 20 states and I think 40 different cities, working with students in their school to have roundtable conversations where they get the time and space to talk about what it's like to be a student at their school and what's really great about it and what's not so great about it. And then we will do workshops and like action planning sessions where students can take those problems that they identified and work with us to create student-centered solutions to those same problems. So then just for clarification, we just always like to talk about definitions of different things that you'll probably hear people talking about throughout the program. So the first is defining student voice versus student choice. So student voice is being at the table and having a seat at the table, being listened to, and developing student-adult relationships that are not tokenization. Whereas student choice is choosing how to share your learning. So that can be with like project-based learning and things like that, and just generally having the decision-making power related to content, classroom development, and how you best learn. So those are 2 different things, student voice versus student choice. So just didn't want anyone to be confused about that. And then just some general information about the broader student voice movement. Student voice does not start or end with just one organization. It is a national network of local and state organizations. It is, a network of people doing work on the ground as well as people doing work regionally at a district level and at the national level to support them. So like one example, Dana mentioned that she is from Oregon Student Voice, which does incredible work at the state level in Oregon. And we just work to build a coalition to support them in their work by building a community and introducing people who are doing similar work across the country so we can all work smarter together. And then this is what we call the student voice ladder. We talk about this a lot with teachers and educators, but we think of this as kind of the ladder towards true student voice. So the lowest level being manipulation, then declaration, and then tokenism. So these three are kind of when students are, quote unquote given a voice, but are really just being manipulated, or are being applauded, but not necessarily given a seat at the table or given voice in decision making. It's the same with tokenization, where students are said to have a voice, but it's really just to support the adults in their decision making, or in the adults trying to use students as a way to say that they are doing good policy and doing good work. Steps 4 and 5 are students informed and students consulted. So this is when you start to get into, students somewhat have a voice. They're being told about something before it happens. They're maybe being consulted about something before a decision is made, but their voices are not truly being used as a way to create equitable policy. Level 6 is student and adult equality. And so this means that students and adults are equal with one another and given equal voice and equal footing. But that's not perfect student voice yet. So the next level up, the second best level, is when things are completely student driven. And then the highest is when there is equity between students and adults. Does this make sense? Does anybody have any questions about this or anything we talked about so far?
No, this makes sense.
Okay, awesome. So then we know that student voice looks different in different places. So student voice in the classroom is different than the larger school and the larger district and the larger community. So these are some examples of what student voice looks like in each different place. So in the classroom, it looks like a student-centered classroom. It looks like rigorous and relevant project-based learning. So it's more than just teachers standing at the front of the room and lecturing. It's giving students the opportunity to study things that interest them and make sure that what they are studying, they're interested in what they are doing. And it's about making things project-based. It's not just learning to take a test and then forget it all the next day, but really giving students authentic, engaging experiences. In a student voice classroom, students feel accepted, they feel heard, they feel valued, and school improvement projects are student-centered. I was actually just talking to a girl the other night where she was saying that her school likes to say that they have student voice because each year when they get when they have money left over to do any like school improvement work, they ask the students what they want, and every year the students tell them what they want, and every year the school redoes the floors the same way, and no one ever asked for the floors to be redone. Like, the floors do not need to be redone. So that last example, student-centered school improvement projects, is really listening to students and actually taking into account what they say, and when it's possible, doing what students are telling them to do. So in the school district and in the school in general, student voice looks like students meeting with administrators regularly, students on school boards as voting members, students on hiring committees. This is a big one where students are able to sit in on the hiring of administrators and principals and teachers to give the student perspective on whether an applicant would be good or not. And then just generally regular school-driven improvement. And then at the community and the state level, students lead education policy. They are consistently considered in all education policy matters. Students as journalists and activists, students are involved, students are able to have a voice and tell stories and get them out there. Students as artists as well, another means to telling stories and amplifying their voices. Students vote in school board elections, regardless of age, or at a younger age, and students are consulted by the State Department of Education on policy matters. Does anybody have any questions about this or any other ideas or any other great examples that they've seen in their classroom or school or community?
Megan, so I don't know. I mean, this is a bit tangential. I'm not sure if you're going to cover this later or at a different session. But one of the questions that I struggle with sometimes whenever professors or adults ask me about this topic is like, well, what's the limit of student voice? Like, where do you draw the line and say like, well, students don't know everything? Because in fact, like we do only have 12 years of experience in the education system. Like we haven't studied it for tens of years, like some professors or adults have. So I'm just wondering for your thoughts on that, or if that comes into the conversation at all.
Yeah, 100%. I was literally just having a conversation with someone about this yesterday, so I'm really glad you brought this up because it's been on my mind too. And I think my thought when I get that question or think about that is that you're right that students are not studying education reform at like the higher ed level, and we're not pretending like we are, but any student regardless of their age can tell you how they feel, and how they feel when they're in school and how they feel about their school or the things that happen in their school impacts their experience, and that goes back to the positive school climate part. And so just that simple fact of just fundamentally understanding that every student has an opinion about their school and has an experience and a story that they can tell you about their school means that student voice can be scaled for every age. Obviously you wouldn't think that a first grader and a 12th grader would have the same capacity and like school improvement efforts, but in the same way that you're able to scale math and science for a first grader as you can scale it differently for a 12th grader, you can scale student voice differently to make sure that every student regardless of their age is being able to share their experience and give their thoughts about their school. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I also have a question that I think you'll cover at some point later too. But coming from someone who doesn't really have much involvement in the school at the moment, like we don't have a chapter system set in place for my school, what would be like the next step to take it one step farther? I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and that's what, over the course of this year through the Action Network, that's what we're going to be talking about. So we'll be having some panels with people to learn more about the different rights of the Student Bill of Rights, specifically school climate and civic engagement, which I'm excited about because that's what y'all said you were most interested in. But then we'll also be doing some tangible skills-based lessons. So things like how to create an action plan, kind of student-based leadership 101, how to tell stories, how to facilitate conversations. So hopefully a combination of all of those skills will help show you kind of what's next as far as how you can go about creating change.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we'll have time for questions at the end if anyone thinks of anything between now and then. But when we think about kind of the outcomes of student voice, we think about this very intersectionally. So student voice being present in school both intersects with education reform concept and leads to reduced dropout rates, more student engagement, increased higher order thinking, better positive school climate, increased social and emotional learning, and increased civic understanding. So kind of what I was talking about in the beginning is the way that, I think about this is that if you can engage students in the school, show them that they have a voice and how, give them time in school to practice being involved in decision making and being involved in institutions and like civic engagement, they'll be more prepared to do that when they leave school. So we believe that students who, their voices are authentically, engaged and understood and given space and a seat at the table in school will be better equipped to do that in society, like once they graduate and once they are, actual full grown adults. So yeah, so in summary, we believe that students should be involved in decisions that impact their education. That's the driving force behind our organization, behind this program, behind all of the other programs we do, and behind the student voice movement more generally. So if anyone has any questions about that, we can talk through those right now. And if not, we can move on and just talk about kind of the logistics of the program overall. Okay, so the Action Network. So for these calls, so we're going to have monthly calls at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern. These are the dates with each topic. So these are all Sunday evenings. There might be times if you're in the journalism fellowship or the ambassador fellowship, there might be times that there's some overlap, which I will be talking to the other program coordinators about that and getting back to you about what call will be different. So don't worry about that. But yeah, so we went through in that original survey when you guys talked about what you were interested in and what you're passionate about, went through all of those, and with the incredible folks from CU Boulder have come up with this agenda. So next month we will be having a speaker talking about education policy, inequity within the system, general overview of that. In November, we're going to be having a couple speakers with a panel on school climate, which is one of the rights on the Student Bill of Rights. December 15th is the topic that people ask for most, so we're excited that we can, tackle that about how we communicate with adults to create change. I know it often feels like the adults don't care and that you can do all this work and they still won't listen to you. So we'll be having that call to talk about how we can communicate with adults in a way that comes from a place of mutual respect and can lead to positive action being taken. When we come back from the holidays in January, we'll be talking about storytelling, the importance of storytelling, how we tell our stories, why storytelling is valuable, and how storytelling can be used to create change. And then going right after that in February, we'll be talking about action planning, how to create an action plan, and how to go from a problem that you identify to a solution that you can implement in your school or your community. In March, we'll be doing another panel for the Student Bill of Rights on civic engagement and what civic engagement looks like in school. And then our last call will be about turning this passion into a movement, how you can continue to stay involved in student voice, and really looking forward and seeing what's next. So all of our calls will take place on Zoom, just like this one. They'll be recorded and sent out after, sometime during the next week for anybody who misses them. So if you have to miss a call, it's really not a big deal. We'll have this. The other thing we're going to be doing is coming up with kind of an office hours hour each week with myself and some of the other team members from Student Voice. So you'll be more than welcome to come anytime during that time, talk to us about what we do, any questions you have, anything you want to talk through in your school. If you want to talk about college or life or whatever, we can do that too. All good. We just want to be here to support you. So hopefully that time will be something we can all take advantage of to get to know each other better and to help you guys with any problems you might have. Okay, so that's it for the fancy presentation. This is my phone number, my email, and my Instagram handle. So please feel free to call, text, whatever. I'm always on my phone. So yeah, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now because I hate doing that. I always feel so weird talking to people when I can't see them. So anyway, does anybody have any questions for me about the program, about anything that we talked about? Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, because you guys offer for people to create chapters in their school, right?
Mm-hmm.
To make so if I'm interested in doing that, where would I start?
Yeah, so what you would do first is you can get on the phone with a girl on our team named Alexis. She oversees our chapters program. And basically, you guys will chat about, what your school's like, why you want to start a chapter, and she will help you kind of go through the steps necessary to get one started up. And then we have a whole packet of resources that gets sent to you once you start a chapter with things like how to run a meeting, how to do an action plan, how to talk to the adults about student voice, things like that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Naomi. I have a quick question.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you would like us to do in between now and the next meeting, like looking into anything or anything like that?
Nothing that you have to do. I think the best thing would be to join Youth United for Action. I will send that in like our debrief email, the link to do that if you're not in that group. And then you can between now and our next call still be, hearing news about student voice and connecting with other people who are also interested in this stuff. And then the other thing I think would be to just follow Student Voice on social media like Instagram and Twitter, just to see, what we're up to and if there's any opportunities between now and then that, we have, they'll be posted on there for everybody to take advantage of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So my school currently doesn't have a student voice chapter.
Mhm.
And I was kind of wondering about starting one, but I wouldn't really know the logistics of working with that because my school is a private school.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit like more tricky to do like outside organizations through my school.
Mhm.
Since their attitude towards that is just kind of like, well, we're a private school, so we don't really have to like do those things or anything.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you had any advice for that.
Yeah, so we have been able to get chapters set up at private schools. I know that it can be very tricky, but it has been done, and so it is possible. And Alexis has been the person who has helped students like every step of the way with that. So she would have the best advice for you. And I'm happy to connect you with her so you can chat with her. The other thing I would say too is that we do have some students who operate as chapters that aren't officially recognized members, recognized like clubs in the school, and they just consistently meet, outside of school. Like, I don't know, I guess they go to like Panera and do everything that a student voice chapter does, just not through the school, so they don't necessarily have to worry about recognition. We don't have a preference of whatever you do because we know that can be very difficult to get things set up and recognized by the school. So yeah, sorry, I don't know if that answered your question, but I can definitely connect you with Alexis, who can give you definitely some more concrete advice on that.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
How can we contact Alexa, the person who was in charge of the chapters?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm going to send out an email to everybody tonight or tomorrow as a wrap up of the call. So I'll include her email, is just alexis@stuvoice.org, but I'll include that in the email so you can reach out to her, or if you just want to respond to the email and tell me, I can connect you with her too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So I have a question about that's a little less logistical and more just like generally related, but just about sort of combating tokenization, because the problem that Oregon Student Voice has really been running into lately is that I think a lot of educators and administrators are becoming a lot more aware that students deserve a seat at the table. What's happening, or what happened with someone who's running for office right now, and then also with one of our school districts, is that they asked Oregon Student Voice to provide input about what was important and how student voice could be implemented, which was great, and we felt like those conversations went really well. but there was never any follow-up and there hasn't been any implementation on the sort of things that we talked about. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on how we can prevent that from happening in the future for things, just really not being very genuine and just like appearing to not be tokenizing, but ending up just like having a one-time conversation where, like, especially with the school district, we plan to collaborate in the future for the months to come, and it just turned into a situation where they're just continuing their behavior now that they like interacted with students.
Yeah, that happened a lot.
Oof. Okay. Yeah. That's tough. Yeah. So a couple things come to mind just like off the top of my head. And so the first thing I would think is like, are there any people who are in similar positions who you feel like do a good job and of like listening to student voice and not tokenizing it?
Well, it's really hard because like the person running for office is obviously running for office, so that's a little different. But with the school district, it was like they reached out to us, like they initiated the conversation. So we felt that they were very invested in integrating authentic student voice, but that hasn't been the case.
Yeah. So I think, so if there are people who are in similar positions who you feel like have done a good job, I would talk to them and say, you know this person and you know us. What advice do you have if there's other members of like the school board that you feel like actually do a good job of listening without tokenizing, and get their perspective on it, because they know more obviously about what's going on behind the scenes. But I also think that this is where storytelling can be really impactful here, and like publishing an op-ed talking about the situation, especially when there's someone running for office. I think that's huge. And using student journalism as a way to say this is what's happening and this is the whole story and this is why it's a problem and it shouldn't be like this moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, if there's no more questions, then that's all I have for everybody.